Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and I've had many questions over the years on how I thought the Great Pyramid was maybe built, and that's a difficult question. And there are some theories out there, some of them good, some of them, when you really think about it, quite preposterous, but I thought I would talk about this today. I don't claim to be right, but I just think this is a possibility that's worth being mentioned, and there might be some other videos that kind of go through the same theory, but maybe not quite the way I do here, but I think a great clue just might be to the north and west of the Great Pyramid. And let's just zoom in on a site here. This is the so-called remains of the Pyramid of Djedefe. And he, I believe, is the grandson of Khufu, if I'm not mistaken. But what I think could be a real possibility is he is just a pharaoh of Egypt that wanted to attach his legacy to something already existing there. And I don't think this pyramid was ever completed, even though it's called the Pyramid of Djedefe. And this is a strange one, and it kind of throws the theory out that ramps were built and stones were hauled up ramps to complete a pyramid, because this is built on a little over 500 foot tall existing mound, and I think that's a great clue to how the Great Pyramid was originally constructed. But I want to jump over to a website here. And before I jump over to the website, let's just read. This comes from those excavations and archaeological work done in the Giza Plateau in 1837. And I am just going to read, and this comes from a time where current theories didn't pollute the landscape of what was found on the Giza Plateau. And this is a very interesting little few paragraphs here. It says, the Pyramid of Abu Rawash. This pyramid is situated about 5 miles to the northwest of those of Giza. The base, 320 feet square, alone remains. The defective places have been made good with masonry, but the bulk of it is formed of the mountain, which has been reduced to a level around it. No part of the external casing is to be found. Indeed, the edifice was probably not ever completed, or even raised to a considerable height, for scarcely any materials and very little rubbish are to be seen, although the situation is difficult of access. An inclined entrance passage and an apartment lying east and west have been constructed in an excavation and have been lined with fine calcareous stone from the quarries. The passage, about 160 feet in length, is the center of the northern front and descends at an angle of 22 degrees. The dimensions of the apartment are about 40 feet by 15, and above it smaller chambers appear to have been constructed similar to those over the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Hieroglyphics have been inscribed, but they cannot be distinctly made out. Upon the adjacent ground are heaps of broken granite, which may possibly be the chippings of the blocks originally carried away for other purposes. The fragments crumble to pieces upon being handled and are much decomposed and covered with moths, either from great antiquity or from an exposure not only to the corroding air of the desert but also to the moist winds of the delta. Some other foundations are upon the same height, which had been already described to be composed of chalk, and which appears to have been worked in very early times. Around the pyramid, it says, the leveled space around the pyramid is about 510 feet above the plain. The eastern and southern sides of the mountain are nearly perpendicular, and beneath it to the southward are ancient remains. The northern side has been sloped away, and an inclined causeway has been constructed from the plain below. It is 4,950 feet in length, 30 feet in breadth, and in some places nearly 40 feet high. About half of it is constructed with masonry. And then it just goes over the little detail of what was found here, but that's a massive long causeway. And, I don't think this pyramid was ever completed. Let's go back to Google Earth here. I think this may be what the Great Pyramid looked like when it was, early in its construction phase many thousands of years ago. When, who knows? But I just find this very interesting, and let's just jump over to Here is what it looks like on top of that mound. And it seems like this, he even says this is constructed like the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid, this long, perfectly aligned east-west passageway, and were the original purposes, the main purposes of these pyramids, observatories, and he goes over that in his book. But it seems to be opened up and was the Great Pyramid just carved out of an original mound, the Grand Gallery carved first, and then the blocks used from the mountain just put around the pyramid? That seems like it would, remove any of the difficult ramps being built. That really is a ridiculous theory. And I find it very interesting that they put in kind of a diagram of what this may have looked like upon completion, but it was never completed, and that's obvious. But were these original structures just meant to be this high with an opened observatory gallery facing directly east? That is very interesting to think of. They have sat on, the Great Pyramid has sat on the Giza Plateau for God knows how long. Was the original structure open? Did this open up? And could you have a perfect view of Orion standing straight up, as it says in the book of Coming Forth by Day? Could that be observed out of the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid? But this is the Pyramid of Djedefe, how they say it would look. I find it very interesting. In one of these books made 200 years ago about Giza, it has this, and you kind of have to tilt your head, but this is a theory of his, that the Great Pyramid originally was a observation gallery with an open gallery here. I just find that very interesting that it kind of has the same look to this Djedefe's pyramid. Did Djedefe just want to attach his legacy to this original structure that was never completed up on this mound at Abu Rawash? Does this tell us how the Great Pyramid was constructed? It was just constructed out of an existing mound, the Grand Gallery cut first. I just find this very interesting to think about. Maybe this gives us a clue on how the Great Pyramid was built. Hope you thought this was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.